Hey MGTOWs and Preppers and MGTOW Preppers. I'm going to post this one on both my Prepper channel and my MGTOW channel. For Preppers, you may not know, but I sort of moved most of my activity over to my MGTOW channel, and I'm not even sure if you know what MGTOW means. And that is, it stands for Men Going Their Own Way. And what it is basically we're a bunch of guys who have looked into things like divorce and alimony and child support and all those horrendous things. And we basically, after giving it due consideration, we're the kind of guys who have just said, man, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to do that marriage thing. Oh, by the way, this stuff right here, this is what they call duckweed. I had some before, but it died one of these recent cold winters. And this stuff is like just tremendously useful for people who are into preparedness. It's a prep with a capital P. But basically, back to the MGTOW thing, we look at all of our friends who have just been brutalized by divorce and all those other horrendous things, and we have just said, after really thinking it over, we've just said, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I came to that conclusion back in 1997. I'm going to get a better screen for this thing. I seem to have lost my other one. But this will do for now. Yeah. Well, anyway, so we basically don't do that sort of thing. But after due consideration, we basically just opt out of that whole marriage thing, and we just sort of live our lives in sort of a peaceful way. It's sort of a very nice, peaceful, prosperous way to live. You guys, I don't know if you guys know about my $100 lawn tractor. I bought it about a year and a half ago and fixed it. Had a couple things wrong with it. Got a trailer for another $150. So $250 for this whole shebang. And a few parts and stuff like that. Yeah, good times. But so basically we have just said no, not doing it, and we enjoy and of course a lot of us have just had the tar beat out of us by like the family court system and all that good stuff, or evil stuff. And we just decided no, not doing it. And those of us who have been through the ringer, we tend to make videos and things about how how horrible their experiences have been, and so we just we just have a decent life not really by ourselves, but without actually marrying. There's nothing wrong with dating or anything like that. Put this one in last year. This is a pear tree. And this one here, the one that we planted here, died. And this one here doesn't really seem to have much activity going on in it. Well, we planted this one about a month and a half ago or so. Oh well. Okay, so that's my explanation to preppers about what MGTOW is. So now let me get to the MGTOW side of my my pals here and explain what duckweed is. And a lot of preppers probably already know about this stuff. This stuff is a high protein, fairly high carbohydrate plant, which will basically, in a good environment, it will double in area and mass about every 48 hours. And I had some before, like back when I lived in the condo, but unfortunately it died. I left it out here and it like froze to death. Never came back. So now I bought some about 2 weeks ago on Amazon and put it in that little butter tub, and now I just transplanted it to this planter here. The rain will come down and fill it up to the drain holes along the side here, and the level will be about like that. But anyway, imagine if we had like a serious economic drop. This stuff would allow us to grow just a tremendous amount of carbohydrates and protein, which could quite possibly turn like a famine into something more like serious hunger and a really bad time. So basically, so let's see. So my plan is, I'm just going to keep it in a tub like that. And if we had a really nasty situation like what's brewing with the Chinese currency and how they're creating their own bank, and the dollar might just be obsolete in a couple of years, in which case we would have to produce much more of our own goods because we couldn't outsource a lot of it. But if that occurs, I would simply put some ditches in along on contour, line it with some plastic, which I have in the shed over there, big huge rolls of the stuff. I mean, I could probably cover most of this backyard with that plastic. But anyway, then fill it with rainwater, transplant the duckweed in there, provide nitrogen in ways that I probably shouldn't mention right here. You know, building compost piles underwater and whatnot, and then it would doubling every 48 hours, unless it was like seriously cold winter. But it would double every 48 hours, and I could probably grow enough of that stuff to make myself absolutely sick of that material after a few months. And then I could spread it. I could like hand it out to other people and show them how to grow it and create just a sort of an expanding area of peace and non-starvation around my own property and around where I live here, that would expand outward at a fairly rapid rate, and then that would cause the frontier of people not starving to expand outward fast enough, hopefully, that I would be in sort of a little peaceful little area. Hey, neighbor! So basically, that's the plan. If we had some horrendous, I mean really seriously horrendous thing like an electromagnetic pulse or something, which is like one of my worst nightmares, this lovely cell phone I have would die, my car would die, almost everything I work on as a heavy diesel truck mechanic would die, and all of the trucks that carry groceries everywhere would die, and most of the trains would be out of commission. the power grid would die, and within a couple of days municipal water would stop in every place that isn't like gravity fed. A few small areas have gravity feed water from a big rain catch or lake or something that's above them in elevation, and something could be done there. The utility workers might be able to keep something going. But in low spots below big water sources, it's quite probable you'd have sewer backups. That's one thing I'm kind of lucky in. I've got a sewer pump here. It's a big, huge tank. And, well, it's not really huge, but it's a tank where all the water from the house flows into, and then there's this thing called a grinder pump that pumps it out into the street, which is higher than here. But if we had a sewer backup out there, it would not back up into the house. It's impossible. It couldn't do it. And if we had an emergency situation where we had a utility cut off or something like that, we'd be in a real horrible situation. But we could still like pour wastewater down the sink and stuff like that, and I would just convert that puppy to a rain catch, or convert it to gray water, and then I would just have that little overflow from the tank would go out into the garden, problem solved. And the only thing we couldn't do is take a dump into the water. We could like wash dishes or shower if we had any water at all, and it wouldn't be hard to set this place up for rain catch either, like digging a big cistern, lining it with plastic, and directing all of the water for the house, the roof, to drop into that cistern. So I would probably use a little pump that I bought a couple years ago. It's a on-demand water pump, and this is it right here. It's 12 volts. It's in what they call an agriculture pump, and it will pump it up to, like, I'm not sure how many psi. I don't know. Anyway, it would basically, I could put this in the cistern or near the cistern, hook it up to it, and then just run a garden hose to any one of the outside faucets here, and turn that puppy on, plug it into my my battery cart here. I got it on the trickle charger, and then with just, I'd turn it on outside, and then I could use any of the faucets or anything inside the house from the rain catch that came off the roof. The only thing I couldn't do would be to drink it, because there might be like bird crap in it or something. Although a lot of people do. I don't want to risk that sort of thing. But I already have a reverse osmosis water filtration system plugged into the house, and it charges the. There's a little spigot that you saw that I filled the duckweed container with, and it also has. It's also hooked up to a on-demand hot water hot water dispenser for tea. And it also has a. It also hooks up to the refrigerator, if I had power, and it would basically pressurize that, and I would have ice and water as long as I had electricity. But even in situations like serious economic collapses, like that big horrible economic collapse they had in Argentina a few years ago. Even places like that, during times like that, they still had power intermittently, even if it's like rolling blackouts and power for like 1 hour a day or something. That would still be enough for my ice maker to be popping out some ice and frozen containers inside the freezer that I could then switch over to the refrigerator every day. So it would be doable but difficult. But anyway, the duckweed is just another piece of the puzzle that you can add to your preps, which, just in case there is like a serious problem, just in case that occurs, it would come in handy. Like any kind of like serious economic collapse, like in another great recession, probably wouldn't need it, but it would have to be something a little bit more dramatic. And with that banking system that China is building, with even Switzerland signing up for it, I think. But it's going to be an alternative to the Federal Reserve System and the world reserve currency, which has been the dollar for the last however many years, since 30s or something. At least the 70s. That's when we really started pushing out the money. But basically, if that is interrupted, some of the elites who have a big profit motive for maintaining the system, they might get a little bit unpleasant. They do things. They don't mind killing people. So they would also have a tendency to blow up countries, or maybe do an EMP attack on China or something, and in which case we would probably have a nuclear response, and man, could it get gross. But during times like that, when real serious bad shit's going down, that would be the time where things like that duckweed would really come in handy. And of course, for other preppers who are into this, preparedness like I am, they would be vastly better off than your average Joe. And back in the day, back when I first moved into this house, I really started getting into MGTOW and men going their own way and all that good stuff. And I that's when I decided to sort of come out as a guy who refuses to marry, right? And I saw how in the MGTOW community, how there was such a great need for the preparedness mindset, because there were a lot of MGTOW who were just living hand to mouth and not really putting away any surplus or any and not doing things to even the basics to increase their own personal security compared to your average Joe. Now, because remember in Haiti, that big huge earthquake in Haiti, and the international relief organizations, they handed out food, but they would only hand it out to women, right? And if you're a guy, you're just shit out of luck, man. You could stand in that line all day and they would just run you off. They wouldn't give you anything. The only people who get aid in emergencies like that, when it really is serious, are women. And guys, that just quadruples our reasoning of why we actually need this MGTOW lifestyle, because if we don't take care of ourselves, nobody else is going to do it. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to move my focus on my YouTubing, move it partially over to MGTOW from preparedness. But I'm still a prepper, still into this sort of thing, and I couldn't recommend it more. Let's see. With when you're a MGTOW, a man going his own way, you don't have to deal with a wife who demands a new car. You don't have to deal with problems with kids. Well, unless you are a divorced MGTOW. But you don't have to deal with so many things that that cause most guys to just be hand-to-mouth grasshoppers who don't plan and don't plan for their future, and they're just barely scraping by trying to survive. And if you are a man going his own way, you can live in a much more minimalist, much more frugal way. You don't have to buy a fancy car. You don't have to buy a fancy car for your wife because she doesn't know how to fix a car. Generally, most of my mechanic coworkers, they have like 2 cars, and the wife gets this pretty awesome, beautiful car at which they commute with, and then the guy gets this fucking wreck that only his skill maintains. So, and then of course everything's equal, right? Not because the woman almost never earns as much as the guy. It's just a wealth transfer away from you if you're a guy, So that's why we just do not do that. There's nothing wrong with dating. There's nothing wrong with having a girlfriend. But 99% of MGTOW will not marry. And most of us 99% of us believe that if you marry, you are not a man going his own way. You are going someone else's way. And if you move in with a woman, that gives her tons of authority. She can call the police anytime she wants and file some kind of false accusation and have you hauled off to jail, right? And that is a form of power that is so tremendous that it changes the power dynamic between the man and the woman, right? And it just puts the man into almost a subordinate position in his own home, depending on the woman. Now, there are women out there, what MGTOWs call NOWALs, which stands for not all women are like that. And there are a lot of very fair-minded, decent, kind women who would never rake you over the coals and just wreck your whole life. They will not call the police on you because you won't buy her a fancy car. But the thing is, it's hard to tell the NOWALs from the waltz. All of the women, the ones who are really amoral. A friend of mine had a video up just recently about a woman who kicked this guy out, wouldn't let him visit his own children because he didn't have any money, and then she killed the kids and put them in a freezer or some shit. Man, women can be fucking evil. They're human beings just like everybody else, and they can be just as twisted and vile and evil as anybody. So basically, MGTOWs are sort of on the alert for that sort of thing. So anyway, that's the main reason why we don't marry. If the power dynamic shifted where in family court the man would actually have a chance to gain custody, it might change, and I would have loved to have a family. Fuck. Look at that backyard, everybody. Look at that kids. That yard is just made for kids to run around and play in. And with a dog and all that, and they could make tree houses and make little forts inside all those blackberries, or they could just do tons of things around here. And the neighborhood's safe and nice, but there is just no way I can risk this sort of thing, because at a drop of the hat, a woman, if she was married, she could just call the police and have me hauled off to jail. Then she could turn around and seize all the assets, and since the house is hers, basically, as much hers as mine, she could turn around and put liens on it, or possibly sell the place, or they can just do all kinds of horrible things, and I could end up living in a frickin' cardboard box down by the bridge, man. So I just can't do it. I agonized over that shit back in 1997 after we spoke to one of my best friends through the plexiglass in the jail downtown, and after agonizing for about 4 months, asking older mechanics about their marriages and how do they regret marrying and all that, and I mean, I would get stories like, "Oh, I love my children," and it basically turns around that they just tolerate their wives and they are not appreciated in their own home, and the wife gains about 80 pounds and growls and is grouchy, and there's just no affection there at all. It's much better, in my opinion, to if you're going to have a relationship, both parties have got to be able to break it off anytime they want to, because when you're stuck, if you're being held for ransom, your entire net worth, and plus being slammed into debt from legal problems and stuff, mostly the woman, but the guy, they can just let themselves go and just basically fall into a big pile of shit, and they get away with it a lot of the times because there's so much chaos involved in breaking up. I just can't do that, so I chose not to. Now it's many years later, probably about 18 years later, and I don't see anything that can change my mind about this, because everything is the same or worse. So I'm not doing it. But anyway, back to the house. I bought this place in 2012, as the prepper side of my audience is aware, and I basically, I mean, I saw the 2008 collapse coming back as far as like 2006, and I was buying silver, and paying off my mortgage in the condo, and ramping my freaking spending down to nothing, and going and buying big containers of nitro-packed wheat and whatnot, and I basically was very grateful that the Great Recession turned out not to be as bad as I thought it was going to be, but all the silver that I bought went from like $16 an ounce all the way up to like $44 an ounce. That in 2008, we of course dropped into recession, and then basically during that time, the condo value went from like $153,000 all the way down to like 53 or something. It was ridiculous, man. And then the silver price started going up and up and up, man. And then it topped out at like $44 an ounce, many times what I bought it for. And but I wanted a house, man. I wanted one bad, because I wanted a real garden. I mean, that patio garden was okay, and I enjoyed it and everything, but man, it just wasn't enough. So I basically just I saved my money, paid the condo off in 2010, and kept buying silver all the way up to around late 2010, when the price was just getting ridiculous. And then 2011 it topped out and started coming down, but the real estate prices were still dropping, and I was watching it and monitoring it and looking at ads and surfing all kinds of real estate websites, and then in 2012 it looked to me like it bottomed. So I pulled the trigger, started seriously shopping, and then I located this place, and I cashed in almost half, maybe about a third of my silver for a down payment on this house. And at those inflated rates, I mean, I got a bit of a tax hit. although I used the silver that I bought most recently at the higher prices, like 24, 25 an ounce, but I cashed it in at 34 an ounce, and then bought this place. And then I was agonizing. I made a video about it. I was agonizing about should I sell the condo? I mean, the value of that condo was just in the toilet, or should I just put a renter in it? And a lot of my subscribers were saying, sell it. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it, so I bit the bullet and put a renter into it. And there's this overweight, nice enough lady. She's hot for me. What can I say? And she's my age, and she's seriously overweight, and she's a feminist too. But anyway, she pays her rent on time, and doesn't give me any trouble, and keeps the place better than I ever did. And but now she's moving out, and the condo has gained almost $30,000 in equity since 2012. So the gamble, I believe, has paid off, and at the end of this month, end of April that is, she's moving out and moving in with her mom, a place her mom owns, and then her mother is going to downsize and move in with her, and then they'll be living sort of frugal, which is good, smart, and it's just in time for me because we are reaching the point where the economy is about to turn around and start heading down again. I made a video on my MGTOW channel, something about economic cycles, and I'm selling the condo. I'll put a link into it. And basically my observations are that every 8 years or so, I mean all the way since 1992, about every 8 years we have a big downturn, and then the economy normalizes, and then it takes about 8 years for the whole cycle to continue until the point where it drops in. 1992, the year 2000, and the year 2008 are the most recent 3 times. Now, before that, in the 70s and the 60s, the cycle could be that they were shorter. They were like maybe 6 or 7 or 5 years instead of 8 years. So anyway, we're probably due for another downturn at the end of this year or in 2016, like a lot of preppers are expecting. We sort of develop a gut feeling for this sort of thing. So anyway, I'm going to take that money, replace the silver, which I put in a down payment to this place. So I'll be back to where I started again as far as actual silver round count. And I will then take the rest of the money and dump it into the mortgage here, and that should drop my my payment schedule down to about maybe 8 years or so. That's if I only paid the normal payment, and which I don't plan to. I've been paying extra on this place since I bought it, like clockwork. Not a lot, but some. But I'll just continue as I have been unless I get like extra money, I might dump it into the mortgage. So then I would be back in 8 years. I'd be back in a situation of owning my own place and not having a house payment. I'll still have to pay the taxes, but municipalities can't make the taxes that arduous because they have to make sure that they want people to pay their taxes. They don't want people to sell their houses and flee the tax area, right? So people who have like mortgages and stuff, they have to have the taxes low enough so that people who have big mortgages can afford to pay the mortgage plus the taxes. Because if they can't and they lose the house, then the house goes into arrears on taxes, and then basically the value of the house drops because it gets full of mice and broken windows and shit, and so basically, the tax people, they don't want you to give your house back. They want to have you paying those taxes. So they can't afford to make them too high. Otherwise, people will abandon them. Just like in Rome, like ancient Rome, you know, once it became really feminist and really nasty, they also did things like taxing fruit trees and people who were not professional fruit tree farmers. They ended up cutting the fruit trees down so that they wouldn't have to pay the tax, because the tax was more than the tree. And then basically the Romans, their government, ended up killing the goose that laid the golden egg. They even made the taxes on the land so high that the peasants, they couldn't make ends meet, and they fled the freaking empire and abandoned their freaking land. And then they had just a bunch of dingweeds growing and no income coming in from that. And then, as everybody knows, Rome collapsed. And just like every big, huge empire, they get really big, feminists take over, it becomes very gynocentric and very autocratic. And then the economy crashes, and then the empire crashes, and then the whole thing starts all over again with a sort of a traditional thing. And when the women can't get away with doing their Miley virus thing, they basically start acting like normal human beings again, and then the civilization does sort of recover, but it takes a while. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm selling the condo now at the end of April, and I'm going to dump the money into the house mortgage, and I'm going to replace the silver which I had used as a down payment. Then I'll be back to where I was, and basically, yeah, living a good life. The gardens, it's just about planting, not really planting time, although I could probably plant, but I'm doing things, still doing the permaculture garden thing. Last year, for example, using permaculture techniques on my garden, I didn't water once, not even in August. And I got tomatoes and potatoes and squash and peas and beans and cherry tomatoes and raspberries and blackberries and fruit and plums and apples, and and I didn't water once. And the only thing I did was fertilize one area along the fence with a bit of chicken manure on top of the mulch in the fall. Then it broke down through the winter. Then it was ready to plant in. I don't turn the soil. I don't use a rototiller. Just cardboard down, chicken manure if it's a new bed, and then I plant nitrogen fixing crops like beans and peas to condition the soil and fix nitrogen in the soil, and then do chop and drop and things like that. And that requires no fertilizer, no pesticides, and no water. So basically, in an emergency situation like an EMP or some kind of economic collapse, and if water becomes very expensive or unavailable, or even just somewhat expensive, I don't have to bankrupt myself buying shitloads of water to water my garden with, because it's designed to sequester water through the winter, and it prevents evaporation, and it allows the plants to get all the water they need naturally. The way, if you're religious, it's the way the Creator designed it. And all of this tearing the soil and turning it all up and destroying the microorganism colonies and the fungal nets, and then killing all of that stuff, that all of those systems that exist to sustain the soil, and then they just and then all the dead bodies of all those organisms are underground, releasing nitrogen, and your plants do great the first year, not so great the second year, and the third year you might as well move because you've killed it, especially if you turn the soil again. So instead of doing that, I just throw chicken manure on a rocky, nasty, horrible soil. Doesn't matter. Then cardboard to suppress the weeds over the winter, and then wood chips on top of that. Done. And then in the springtime, you can put your hand that far down into the soil, and the rocks just move out of the way when you put your hand in the soil because the soil is so soft. Dandelions that manage to pop up through the mulch, you can just grab them and just sort of work them in a circle and pull the whole freaking root out and lay it on the soil surface. And little bulb weeds, like little flower bulb weeds that we've got, I just pull those out and set those on the surface, and then they disappear. Something comes by and squirrels away with it. Maybe it's squirrels. So anyway, that's definitely the way to do it. I'm also going to do my composting tomato planters again. This compost tumbler is good, the one that I've got out there. It's a really neat system. I can just walk out there with my little container from the fridge and throw it in, and then tumble it and everything, but it's not quite fast enough for me. So I'm going to also have a couple of 5-gallon, 6-gallon buckets with soil, and not much soil, just a little soil on the bottom. Throw the tomato start in there, and then put compost, dirt, and then the tomato will grow up, and and basically they can actually poke a root directly into the compost and gain the nutrients from it even when the compost isn't broken down. It's a fascinating thing. And the little hairs on the side of the tomato vine that you can feel them if you're close enough to one, and those, if they find themselves under the soil surface, immediately turn into roots, and then instantly the whole area just fills, that whole tub just fills with tomato roots. And then at the end of the year, when it freezes and dies because of the frost, you just chop the whole thing down to the soil surface and leave it there over the winter. And then in the spring, you've got a 5-gallon container full of excellent compost that you can use for other planters or other places in your garden. And then you can just recock the thing and then pull the trigger on another tomato planter thing and do the whole thing over again the next year. It's a really cool thing. So anyway, I guess that's about it. Yikes, I've been doing this for 40 minutes. Okay, guys, sorry about my not having that many, any prepper videos for a while because I've been doing other things, and I've even been neglecting my MGTOW channel a little bit, so I don't know, we'll see if I can do better later.